Our investigation into the legalization of cannabis begins in Guerrero, southwest Mexico. This farmer works for the drug cartels. His illegally grown cannabis is destined for the United States.
Hay gente que se dedica pues a comprar esto de una manera de clandestina. Sí, yo cuando en el 92 tenía como unos 14 años, yo ya sembraba esto, ya la marihuana ilegalmente. Costaba $1,000 el kilo.
However, since some American states have begun legally producing cannabis, the cartels are no longer buying his crop.
Como un ejemplo de Colorado que legalizaron nos afectó porque es un estado más que se está perdiendo. Se está perdiendo millones de gente que consumen esto porque llevan legalmente y compran, como comprar un cigarro, comprar un chicle, un ejemplo. No puede competir con un mercado legal y más bueno, y que si nuestro producto no sirve, pues tampoco no vamos a tener mercado.
In the last few years, it's become possible to buy marijuana or cannabis legally in 10 or so American states without getting involved with the black market. In Switzerland, cannabis cigarettes are found in supermarkets or train stations. In Germany, its medicinal use is authorized and reimbursed.
Whenever you're ready.
In Canada, the cannabis business has become a thriving, publicly traded industry.
C'est quand même un marché important parce que c'est un marché qui serait supérieur à celui du tabac.
Yet this plant has long been banned.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. Whenever you're ready.
In 1961, cannabis was classified as an illegal substance by UN conventions, just like heroin or cocaine.
Whenever you're ready.
Marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug in the United States, and we haven't begun to find out all of the ill effects.
Since then, the states have spent hundreds of billions of dollars on the war on drugs.
I shall continue to oppose efforts
A completely ineffective war.
to legalize.
Worldwide cannabis use has never been so high. So,
Whenever you're ready.
isn't it time to legalize cannabis like alcohol or tobacco?
Legalize
In some countries, such as France, the political class refuses to open the debate. However, 700,000 French, adolescents and adults, smoke every day, and 17 million French have already smoked.
Avant la prohibition du cannabis, en France, nous réclamons un véritable débat. Nous voulons la dépénalisation de l'usage. Tous les mains en l'air, tous les mains en l'air. Tout le monde, mains en l'air, mains en l'air, mains en l'air, go!
The current policy does not satisfy consumers, doctors, or the police.
La position de la France est une non-position, c'est-à-dire elle ne prend pas du tout acte de l'échec de ses politiques publiques depuis 40 ans. On est le dernier pays aujourd'hui parmi tous nos voisins à ne pas avoir au moins dépénalisé.
So what happens when states legalize this substance? How have the mafias, who had previously had the monopoly on this trade, reacted?
I think the criminals will have lots of good business days, but they won't be in cannabis.
Who really profits from legalization? In the United States, cannabis has been banned at the federal level since 1937. But over the past few years, the legalization debate has spread to the states. In Michigan, residents will vote by referendum on proposal number 1 to legalize the substance. Since Colorado and Washington State in 2014, 9 states have authorized cannabis for adults. Michigan may be the 10th. A victory could encourage its neighbors to do the same.
We need some changes in Michigan.
Thanks to this referendum's proposal number 1, legalization supporters can finally present their arguments in the media.
I'm voting yes on 1. Yes on 1 means fewer drug dealers on the streets. Legalization is working in other places. In Colorado and Washington, no increase in marijuana use by teenagers.
Also, $500 million in new revenue for Michigan.
Vote yes on 1.
I'm proud to vote yes.
Let's vote yes on Prop 1.
But the battle is far from won. In the poor neighborhoods, a large proportion of the Afro-American population are opposed to the legalization.
Excuse me, sir. Can I get a piece of literature? On proposal 18-1, we're against the legalization of recreational marijuana. We don't want it to pass. All right, I appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. All right.
They refuse the installation of cannabis shops in this neighborhood, where drug use is considerable.
We're just fighting recreational. We don't want recreational, meaning that just like you can go to a liquor store and pick up alcohol, they're going to make it legalized where they're going to open a dispensary right next to these liquor stores, and anybody over the age of 21 or 18 can go in there and partake in it.
So that's wrong. So now what they gonna do? Everybody that they put in jail for dope, are they gonna let them out?
Some fear that the product may become even more commonplace.
It's making it bad for kids that don't do drugs or do nothing because they see that everybody doing it and they think that it's cool and that's the thing to do. Right. Well, back in the day, even if your parents did it, they would keep doing it while y'all was gone or in the basement or in the backyard or in the room. Well, now they want to make everything legal. And I don't believe that. They're making kids grow up too fast and seeing a lot of stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
These anti-legalization activists do not believe that future taxes on cannabis will benefit their community.
We've been told once that if we legalize tobacco, if we legalize liquor, if we legalize, alcohol and lottery, that those funds, those taxes will literally go to fixing our schools. We should have some of the best schools in the country because, we've legalized it, we've taxed it. But how is that happening? How is that going in our communities? We don't see a bit of revenue, a bit of taxes. So what we're doing, we're compelling more of a substance matter and more of a drug to our communities. So I would say, once again, we've been duped by lottery. We've been duped by alcohol. Let's not be duped by dope.
Supporters of legalization have already won a first victory. Since a previous referendum, dispensaries have been selling marijuana on prescription. Marijuana has around 100 molecules that affect the brain. The most well-known is THC, whose psychoactive effects generate the euphoria sought by joint smokers. Another molecule is CBD, which has therapeutic properties. It has anxiolytic and anti-epileptic effects. It is used to treat certain pains and nausea. For the residents of this poor neighborhood, there is no question of going beyond medical use.
I'm calling to see if I can get Miss Mincy's support when it comes to voting no on Proposal 18-1.
Yes, vote no on Proposal 18-1.
This cold calling is financed by a man named Kevin Sabet, former drugs policy advisor to Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama. Since 2014, he has raised millions of dollars to obstruct marijuana.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Sabet. Rolling Stone called me the #1 enemy to the pot industry, and that is a badge of honor that I wear. And the pot industry, makes me out to be the devil, which, again, when the devil's calling you the devil, it cancels it out. So I'm okay with that. And I started investigating this industry, this pot industry, because I heard, people want to legalize marijuana, and I said, okay, well, what's that really about? And the more digging I did, the dirtier it looked to me. The more digging I did, the more that I saw that this was about a few people making a lot of money. And let me tell you, those people are already rich. I wouldn't be here right now. We have a fight in North Dakota. We have a fight in New Jersey. We have a fight in New York. I'm in DC all the time. I'm meeting with people. I wouldn't be here for 2 days if I didn't think this was winnable. Do you want a drug-free society or do you want a free drug society? Think about that.
Kevin Sabet's main opponent is Matt Schweich. He is the Deputy Director of the Marijuana Policy Project, the main pro-legalization organization. Its activists believe that cannabis prohibition is a deeply unfair system.
Why do we do this? Why do we care about ending marijuana prohibition? And the reason is it's been an abject failure in public policy. It's difficult to find examples of public policies that have failed so miserably in this country's history. And for me, it's about injustice. The injustice of the racial disparity. African Americans in Michigan were 2.6 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana than white Michiganders, even though both groups use marijuana at roughly the same rates. Please take your lawn signs. Let's show that there are people across the state that want Prop 1 to pass.
Another argument, the prohibition of cannabis is costly to the taxpayer.
There are many reasons why we should legalize, regulate, and tax marijuana. The first is law enforcement resources. It doesn't make sense for police and law enforcement to be going after people for marijuana offenses. It's a waste of their time. It's a waste of our public tax dollars. In addition, we're clogging up courts with unnecessary cases, wasting the time of prosecutors, wasting the time of judge, creating more costs for the public. It's all a massive waste, and we're all better off by allowing law enforcement to focus on real serious crime in this country.
Attacking criminal organizations by depriving them of some of their resources is one of the objectives of the bill. Remove the production and distribution of marijuana from the illegal market, and prevent the proceeds of the marijuana trade from going to criminal businesses or gangs.
I grow 3 different strains. I've been growing them for the last 10 years. I'm trying to perfect them and to be the best product I can produce. Number 1 is Money Maker, and it's a hybrid. It's 50-50 sativa and indica. Okay, and then I do OG Kush. It's about 12% THC. And I have a lemon Kush, and this is what I'm working with. In my view, total legalization is not a good thing for my business. It's going to be taken over by corporations, and eventually it'll be just like alcohol, you know. It'll be taken out of our hands. We'll just be able to go and purchase it or consume it from the big companies. My prices are basically street prices. I would sell an ounce now for like $200. And I mean, in legalization, I may have to drop that 200 to like 150, you know, so just to compete, yeah. What am I gonna do? I suppose I'll get a job in the dispensary.
Does legalization keep its promises? What are the benefits for the consumer and society? Part of the answer can be found in Colorado.
Here we are in Trinidad, Colorado, about 13 miles from the New Mexico border. We are currently walking down what the locals call the cannabis corridor. We have about 6 to 7 cannabis dispensaries right here on this street. The parking spots are full up, ready for the consumers to come by and purchase their legal cannabis.
Here, legal cannabis has been available over the counter since 2014. This business attracts customers from neighboring states. Surrounded by 8 prohibitionist states, Colorado has become a cannabis oasis.
So when we first enter Strawberry Fields, you'll enter up into our lobby. You'll be greeted by our security guard, Tony, which will verify your credentials and ensure that you could shop with us and purchase legal cannabis. We also have some other security measures in this room, such as our cameras. We are required by law to keep that rolling. It'll record for about 24 hours of the day, and we maintain footage for about 40 days. Welcome in, brother. How we doing? We also have our restricted access area posted, which is Rule 403 in the Colorado Cannabis Law, stating that it is a restricted access you're about to enter in. You must be over the age of 21.
In order to attract the black market regulars, these shops offer a good 20 varieties of dried flowers. The dried flower is the part of the plant that contains THC, and the part that consumers smoke. With this supply, 10 times bigger than on the street, buying drugs has become a full-blown commercial experience. You come here to choose your weed the way you would choose your tea. And to prevail over the dealers, the legal market doesn't hesitate in offering much stronger products.
The regulated system, you're able to come in and you're able to browse around. You're able to get educated from highly knowledgeable bud tenders. Compared to the black market, you're going to end up in a shady warehouse or a shady residence, and you're really only going to be able to get whatever they have to offer.
I can purchase it on the streets, and I feel like I'm funding a lot of dirty business. I'm sure it all rolls back up to the cartel. So I figure I'd just rather come here and get it where I know it's tested and it's, I'm helping local businesses. I'm helping an economy grow. I'm doing it out in the open, and it's actually cheaper. Back home, I'd pay $300, $350 for an ounce. Here, I can get an ounce for $60.
Since 2014, $6 billion worth of marijuana has been sold in Colorado stores. An amount that hasn't lined the traffickers' pockets. On this point, this promise by legalization supporters has been kept. Today, this state has more cannabis shops than Starbucks and McDonald's combined. Colorado authorities are closely monitoring the impact of this new market.
Since legalization of retail marijuana, we have not seen an increase in youth use, in youth consumption. It's stayed very much the same. With adults, it initially has stayed the same, but just this past year, we're starting to see a slight increase being driven by younger adult use. If we're worried about treatment for addiction, if we're worried about driving impaired, if we're worried about what substance kids are using or that young children are getting into in their parents' home, then we should be talking about alcohol. We shouldn't even be talking about marijuana because it's not even on the radar from a public health standpoint the way that alcohol is.
legal psychoactive substances are, indeed, the most lethal. According to the United States health authorities, alcohol is responsible for 88,000 deaths per year, tobacco for 480,000. However, no one dies from cannabis. Nevertheless, there are negative effects on the organism, in particular when it comes to the young. It can provoke psychosis and disrupt heart rate or memory. In Colorado, like elsewhere, cannabis received a bad press before its legalization. Lawyer Brian Vicente is one of those who won the battle of public opinion. November 2012, with 55% of the vote in favor, the pro-legalization won their first victory. To convince voters, Brian Vicente came up with an argument that will be repeated in Michigan.
We know that Colorado has, essentially $1 billion industry around marijuana. Prior to Amendment 64 passing in 2012, all that money was flowing into the hands of the underground market. So you had cartels and gangsters that were getting that revenue, and we presented a plan to the state to tax it and have that come into state coffers, and that resonated with folks.
Above all, they are committed to redistributing cannabis taxes into education.
Let's vote for the good guys and against the bad guys. Let's have marijuana tax money go to our schools rather than criminals in Mexico. Vote for Colorado. Vote yes on Amendment 64.
So going into the campaign and presenting it to the voters, we hired a think tank to kind of look at the issue, to sort of project into the future to figure out how much tax revenue will be generated. They figured there'd be around $60 million in revenue that was gathered. And when we wrote the law, we said, okay, the first $40 million of that every year will go to public schools.
Jobs for our people, money for schools. Who could ask for more? Strict regulation, fund education. Yes, on 64.
Today, tax revenues are indeed being used to renovate schools, and they're much more significant than expected.
Marijuana accounts for approximately $250 million of the revenue that the Department of Revenue touches each year. The Department of Revenue as a whole accounts for $12 billion of the state's $30 billion budget in terms of the amount of revenues that come in. So marijuana is actually a relatively small percentage of the overall state's revenue.
But $250 million is less than 1% of the state's overall budget. Not enough to revolutionize public finances.
Having said that, every single dollar that government can get is obviously beneficial.
Whilst beneficial for the state's finances, legalization is also beneficial for the labor market. In Colorado, the new cannabis industry has created more than 40,000 jobs. The plant has become an agricultural commodity like any other.
We are here at our hemp facility. So with most of this plot here, we have irrigation lines to keep a completely automated feed. Some of the irrigation techniques that we use here is an automatic drip system. Each plot is aligned with a drip hose, and we bring pre-made water and nutrient mix down to the fields and allow this drip system to constantly feed and irrigate all these plants automatically. I don't think that legal enterprises would want to risk losing millions of dollars to invest in their product when the police can come knock on their door anytime and shut them down, take their plants, and unfortunately throw them in jail.
Protected by legalization, farmers have a head start in the competition with the black market. Here, the industry is improving its agricultural techniques and productivity gains.
Over here, it looks like we have a couple of grape kush flowers right now. So what's happening here is they're starting to bud and blossom. So this is where the secretion of the THC, as you can see on this plant, is coming through nice and full. And all those little crystals are going to hold all the cannabinoids that we're really looking for inside of there.
The company has invested $5 million in this greenhouse.
So from beginning to end, there's a lot of industrialized equipment that comes into play in this greenhouse. A majority, almost 90%, or actually about 100% of this greenhouse is operated remotely from a computer-controlled system. And that could be from the shades, to the water walls behind us, to the irrigation lines, to the booms.
These investments allow them to produce 5 crops a year, compared to the 1 or 2 from illegal fields. The profitability is exceptional.
Typically, our overhead monthly is anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000. Typically, revenue that we bring in could be anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000.
The new cannabis industry, having started from scratch, is now one of the fastest growing sectors in the United States. And it's not about to stop. The industry is developing new products for a new clientele, those who don't smoke cannabis, edible products.
This edible is actually made with distillate oil and not canna butter, and the majority of our consumers do not really like particularly the taste of cannabis when they're eating. So it's one of the main benefits of using distillate in edibles. You kind of eliminate some of that cannabis taste when you're eating it. We want to make this desirable and delectable to our customers. So we like to use that real deep orange color in there. Just makes you want to devour the whole box.
The reason why we have edibles and gummy bears and cookies and ice creams and sodas and chocolates and strawberry crunch and cake and brownies is because smoking is out of vogue in America. This is a way to introduce marijuana to people and young people, new people, attract new customers. Do you want to smoke an ugly looking cigarette or have a nice chocolate brownie with a little bit of THC? And this is my worry with marijuana, that the industry comes in, innovates, commercializes, creates new products, and creates deadlier products over time that hurt many, many, many more people than if it was still illegal and only a small number of people used it, and we didn't have the innovation in the market like we do. I mean, say what you want about Pablo Escobar and Colombian drug lords and Mexican drug lords, they didn't create the marijuana gummy bear. They didn't create the marijuana 99% THC pure concentrate. They didn't.
If you look at tobacco and you look at alcohol and you look at coffee, those are the most common used psychoactives, right? You can change the taste and you can change the potency. But with cannabis, you have taste, you have potency, you have route of administration, right? You can have a spray, you can have a lozenge, you can have a tincture. So every time you add a new dimension, you're exponentially adding different combinations that can create different products for different reasons, for different people. It's a merchandiser's dream.
In recent years, cannabis has been moving forward in the market economy. The sector is experiencing an economic boom similar to that of modern technology. In the heart of Silicon Valley, hundreds of companies are showcasing the tools and accessories that the industry needs to grow. Some imagine a world where joints will be available in vending machines. Cannabis even has its lobby, the National Cannabis Industry Association, which defends the interests of 2,000 companies. Its priority is to put pressure on Washington to legalize across the country.
What will make things change is when federal law changes, when it is no longer illegal at the federal level to be in the cannabis business. When that happens, it will be a phase change and a feeding frenzy among institutional investors, Fortune 500 companies, and Fortune 100 companies and multinational companies all around the world will be falling all over themselves to buy companies in this space to get ahead of the pack.
Whilst waiting for the federal ban to be lifted, startups are looking to gain first place. The chain MedMen wants to become the industry's leading brand, the Starbucks of cannabis.
This industry is very much a race, but because again, it's in the beginning, right? So there are a lot of people who are trying to establish themselves to be the Facebook or the Anheuser-Busch or the, you name it, like any leading brand on any established industry. When the industry is beginning, it's a race.
In order to win, the brand must invest a lot and fast. But because of the federal ban, American banks are refusing to lend. They risk being accused of money laundering.
I cannot walk into JP Morgan and say, I have a great idea for a business. I want a $50 million business loan. Can you give it to me? And they'll say, what kind of business? Marijuana, and boom, no more conversation, right? So whenever you're growing an industry that fast, you need investment capital. And for the most part, in recent years, that capital was raised through venture capital, hedge funds, wealthy individuals, family offices, private equity funds. So to keep it very simple, it's rich people with a lot of money who are investing into this industry because we cannot go to Wall Street and raise money.
Because Wall Street does not accept American cannabis companies, MedMen went to raise funds in a country that has legalized at the federal level, Canada.
So currently in the Canadian Securities Exchange, our market cap or the value of the company, depending on where the share price is somewhere around $1.5 billion US.
Cannabis on the stock market. Thousands of jobs created and taxes channeled into schools. It seems the time is long past when America wanted to block the drug.
I shall continue to oppose efforts to legalize marijuana.
Marijuana is a weed and spreads like crabgrass once it goes to seed. But 3 Marines armed with flamethrowers live up to the Corps' boast. They have the situation well in hand.
Yet in Mexico, this war on drugs continues. This illegal field on state property was spotted by the army. This is the cartel's marijuana, a production sent to the United States by illegal channels.
Pues estamos en el área del cártel del Pacífico, cártel de Sinaloa, pues es el de Chapo Guzmán, el Mayo Zambada, ¿no? Ya lo iban a cultivar, yo creo que en una semana más ya estaba ahí en la frontera, ¿no? Esta erradicación que se está llevando a cabo es para que las drogas no lleguen a sus hijos.
Que Estados Unidos tiene una política muy hipócrita. Está avanzando, por un lado, a la legalización, mientras que fuera de Estados Unidos sigue promoviendo la guerra contra las drogas y sigue promoviendo el fortalecimiento de las policías y de los ejércitos para que continuemos la guerra, la guerra contra las drogas en el sur global.
Mexican society pays a heavy price for this policy aimed at protecting the American population. The drug war has reinforced the cartels. Since 2006, Mexico has been experiencing the second most deadly conflict in the world after Syria. 200,000 dead, tens of thousands missing. The state of Oaxaca in the country's south is a great place to grow marijuana. It is not easy to access the land safely. It's the object of conflicts between villages. These farmers, some of whom plant marijuana, have formed a self-defense group to protect their fields.
Eso es lo que quieren ellos, quitarlos los terrenos, pues, para que ellos siembran marihuana, pues, y eso no lo vamos a permitir nosotros, pues, para que los quitan los terrenos que les pertenecen a nosotros, pues.
Estamos dispuestos a defendernos hasta la muerte.
Estamos hartos de la gente de San Vicente Coatlán que ha humillado al pueblo de Villa Sola de Vega. No queremos que sigan matando a nuestra gente. Tenemos al pueblo de Paso Ancho que lo han desaparecido. Les quemaron sus casas, animales, su ganado. Estamos hartos y estamos dispuestos a defender nuestras tierras.
Unidos por la paz de nuestro pueblo. Sola de Vega. Sola de Vega.
Todos fumar marihuana.
A villager has agreed to take us to one of the people who supply marijuana to the cartels. The variety grown in this region has been consumed in the United States since the 1970s. The war on drugs has never been able to eradicate it.
Aquí la marihuana entró como en el 1980. Yo me doy cuenta porque pues ya estaba yo algo grandecito y tenía como 20 años. Son como 5.300 gentes en el distrito de Sola de Vega. 2.000, 1.500 siembran marihuana. Poquito, ¿quién saca 5 kilos, 10 kilos, 20 kilos? Se la venden a una persona que acapara.
Today, cartels are having a hard time selling their merchandise. American customers no longer want it. They can find better in stores.
Hay personas que tienen de 1 año, 2 años, y ahí está el producto. Pues es un trabajo que lleva procedimiento y pues lamentablemente pues a nadie le gusta tirar sus cosas.
In order to survive, they're trying to improve their merchandise.
Esta semilla nos dijeron que es mejor que la que estábamos sembrando porque esta nos iba a dar mejor producto y más fuerte. Pues me la ofreció pues la misma gente que se dedica a comprar el mercado. Y ellos tratan de mejorar la calidad de planta para que también lleven un buen producto. Porque si ellos no llevan un buen producto, también no tienen un mercado bueno.
Los decomisos de marihuana en la frontera estadounidense, del lado estadounidense, han disminuido 2/3 partes desde el inicio de los mercados legales para fines lúdicos. Los decomisos en México han disminuido 50% en los últimos 4 o 5 años. Creo que en términos de precio, en algunos estados ya estamos prácticamente en el punto donde es más competitiva la marihuana producida legalmente en Estados Unidos que la marihuana producida en México y contrabandeada hacia Estados Unidos. Esto va a ser un golpe mortal hacia esta industria ilegal.
An unexpected consequence of the legalization of cannabis, cartels are now turning to far more dangerous drugs in the villages of Guerrero. The poppy has replaced marijuana. It's the main ingredient in morphine, and also in heroin, an increasingly popular drug in the United States. Mexico has become the world's 3rd largest producer of heroin after Afghanistan and Burma. Today, the army is destroying more poppy than marijuana fields. This farmer has lost 2 acres of poppies.
estamos aquí en la planta, pues nos da tiempo de escondernos, pues aparecen allá, se vienen. Le digo, esa vez que nos fumigaron, pues la primera planta que fumigaron fue ahí enfrente. Lo que pasa es que cuando vienen, siempre vienen dos helicópteros. No anda uno nomás el que fumiga. El otro que anda es el que cuida. Vienen los soldados afuera pues asomándose pues con sus armas así, por cualquier movimiento que vea. Ese día que le fumigaron, luego nos venimos a rayar. No nos queda otra que neciarle pues venir. Ahorita tenemos que volver a sembrar más grande para reponernos, pues, para reponernos de lo que perdimos. Si Dios quiere, que le vamos a aventar casi todo, pues, las 4 hectáreas.
He would rather sell his crop to the pharmaceutical industry to make morphine. But the production of morphine is governed by international conventions that only allow certain countries to manufacture it. Mexico is not one of them.
Hay una gran contradicción. Mientras que en Estados Unidos hay opiáceos y opioides medicinales que les permiten incluso volverse adictos, cuando un mexicano tiene un enfermo de cáncer que se está muriendo y necesita de un tratamiento paliativo a su dolor, es casi imposible conseguirle morfina. En México, los campesinos que cultivan amapola están condenados a vender su producto a los actores criminales y a volverse esclavos de los criminales.
For cartels, heroin represents a much higher turnover than marijuana. Heroin is prepared on-site by cartel members before being exported.
En la organización, bueno, nosotros nos encargamos de esto más o menos, de procesar esto, pues el material. Nosotros somos los cocineros o los químicos, por decirlo así. Bueno, después de que se elabora, se hacen, por decir esto, se vende por kilo, por pedazo, por medio kilo, por lo que sea. Esto todavía le falta un proceso. Nosotros vamos a sacar hasta este proceso, que es la base. Ya otro se encarga de transportarla, se sigue otra ruta para llegar a otra gente es la que lo compra, este producto.
De rumbo a Estados Unidos.
A Estados Unidos, de la frontera para allá, por decirlo así. Estados Unidos, bueno, toda esa parte ya del extranjero.
For the past few years, the heroin supply has spread to the American streets. In Detroit, it is consumed more than marijuana. The dealers have adapted to the market.
Right here, this plate here is what everyone wants that mess around with drugs. This is what they want. This is what they want right here. The cocaine and the heroin. If they see this, they're gonna think it's cocaine, but it's heroin. And it's the best.
Who's buying the heroin? It's the young, the middle, the old, the people who is on the pills, and the doctors and got indicted or either cut them off. So they have no other reason but to come to the hood now. So they getting stronger drugs at a cheaper price. If they need it, they know exactly where to come.
This here, dangerous. And this steady just getting dangerous. But myself, I would rather just sell the marijuana if I could.
The legalization of cannabis in the United States will not cause drug dealers to disappear. They are already turning to other products. In Europe, the precursor concerning drugs policy is the Netherlands. We often think that cannabis is legal in this country. This is not true. In reality, it is simply tolerated. Since 1976, sales have been supervised in coffee shops. A system that is being increasingly criticized because it relies on the black market.
Yes, dankjewel.
Ja, bedankt.
Hey, fijn weekend. Doei. Hey, zo weer. Tuurlijk, mag ik even het maatschappij?
Each client is entitled to 5 grams per purchase.
Ik had gisteren lekker dingen van Erwin gekregen. Van
Eentje?
Ja.
Ik heb eventueel... Dit is die witte Santa Maria.
Ja, Santa Maria was het.
Dit is de Gorilla.
Hoi.
Hey, en een fijn weekend. Alsjeblieft. Onder de hash is dat momenteel de amnesiapollen. Dat is deze. Dit loopt echt super hard, omdat dit is ook een wat zuivere hasje. Die wordt ook gemaakt uit de amnesia, dus het is wel wat sterker. Van de wiet is dat de lemon haze loopt super hard. En van de witte wietjes heb ik de Santa Maria, wat het beste loopt. Dit zijn mijn 3 meest verkopende producten die ik heb.
Dutch law protects consumers, but not coffee shop owners. They are not allowed to buy the drugs they sell. A strange system that forces them to buy supplies on the black market. These pre-rolled joints are delivered by traffickers.
Ja, wij worden gedoogd. We hebben een gedoogstelsel en wij mogen cannabis verkopen. We mogen het feitelijk niet inkopen. De achterdeur is illegaal, zoals dat heet in Holland. De achterdeur, de illegale achterdeur. Ik kan dus moeilijk vertellen waar de wiet vandaan komt. Sommige coffeeshophouders zeggen bij zo'n vraag... ja, het komt uit de lucht vallen. Het komt van God. Want ja, als wij daar informatie over verstrekken... ja, dan zijn we dus strafbaar. Dan kan de officier van justitie zeggen... oh, dat is interessante informatie. Daar gaan wij op acteren. En dan heb je een probleem, want de achterdeur is illegaal.
Even more serious, the fact that coffee shops are supplied by the black market puts their customers at risk.
Er is steeds meer bewerkte wiet op de markt. Ja, je gooit er plastic, je spuit er plastic overheen. Of je doopt het ergens in. Dit is natuurlijk, je weet niet wat er gebeurt als je dit soort dingen rookt. Mogelijk kankerverwekkend, dus ja, dat is een hele kwalijke zaak. 10 jaar geleden kwam je dat bijna niet tegen, bewerkt wiet in coffeeshops. Wel in de export. Maar tegenwoordig het is steeds moeilijker om zuivere wiet te kopen.
It all began in the 1970s, the peace and love years. It was the explosion of drugs in Europe. The Dutch government wanted to protect young people by separating the increasingly popular cannabis market from that of hard drugs. Thanks to the coffee shops, they no longer had to find their supply on the street and associate with dealers. But this decision was to be only the first step in a more ambitious piece of legislation. Christian Democratic Minister Dries van Acht is behind the legislation.
Nou, ik was minister van Justitie en dus, het was mijn taak om in de strafwet voorzieningen te treffen, daartoe leidende dat het verkopen en zelfs in bezit hebben van harddrugs anders zou worden bestraft, zwaarder, dan van zachte drugs. Ja, ik had veel liever de zachte drugs helemaal uit de strafwet gehaald, maar dat was toentertijd politiek niet haalbaar.
U wilde het eigenlijk al legaliseren?
Ik wilde dat doen. Voor de softdrugs wel, ja.
But with part of the political class worried by legislation, the project was abandoned. As a result, consumers have the right to smoke a merchandise that no one is allowed to produce. And this has been going on for 40 years.
Maar er blijft natuurlijk een idiotie over. Die was er vanaf het begin al. En is er helaas nu nog de idiotie van de voordeur en de achterdeur. Dus de achterdeur is, ja, u weet het natuurlijk. De achterdeur is dat coffeeshophouders mogen zelf niet kopen van telers. Maar ze mogen wel verkopen aan klanten. Mits kleine hoeveelheden, weinig per dag en zo. Maar daar zit dus een ongerijmdheid in. Iets heel idioots. De oplossing is de totale vrijmaking voor de totale liberalisatie van cannabis.
This inconsistent policy has left the door wide open to organized crime.
Als het gaat om bijzondere vangsten, zeker in de 80e jaren, toen was het nog zo dat heel veel hashish werd geïmporteerd vanuit Marokko. Wij importeren momenteel bijna niets meer. Nu zien we dat er heel veel ondergronds gaat, letterlijk ondergronds, onder de grond in containers. Maar we zien nu ook dat het buitengebied, de stallen, de veestallen, nu veel meer gebruikt worden om professionele kwekerijen aan te leggen. En daardoor zien wij ook dat veel liquidaties, ook in heel Nederland, nu steeds meer gaan voorkomen die gerelateerd zijn aan de drugshandel.
Faced with an increasing number of revenge attacks, local elected officials are calling for a change of course.
Ik heb steeds ook uitgelegd en gezegd dat in het kader van het cannabisbeleid en het halfslachtig gedoogbeleid eigenlijk de overheid de rode loper heeft uitgerold voor de georganiseerde criminaliteit.
En wat stelt u voor wat er moet gebeuren?
Dat we het systeem afmaken. Dat we het gedoogbeleid wat we in Nederland hebben gehad vanaf de jaren 70 eigenlijk ver volmaken. De achterdeur niet meer afhankelijk laten zijn van die illegale markt. Maar ervoor te zorgen dat er een bedrijf is waar de spullen kunnen worden geteeld. Bedrijf is wat een vergunning heeft gekregen van de overheid.
As from 2020, dozens of cities will set up an official supply chain. Legalization on a reduced scale. If the experiment is conclusive, it could be extended across the country. Meanwhile, the former pioneering country is falling behind on legalizing states. In the United States, on the other hand, nothing seems to be able to stop the wave of legalization.
It's my great pleasure to say that we have legalized marijuana.
The Yes campaign won with 55% of the votes.
We did it! We won!
Michigan is the 10th victory for recreational cannabis.
We fucking won.
They raised $3,700,000 for the campaign, much more than the No camp.
Our speaker and guest of honor, Dr. Kevin Sabet, thank you.
Well, it's really an honor to be here.
The opponents had only $2,700,000, an insufficient amount to give any hope in winning such a campaign in the United States.
It's been a very interesting campaign so far in that way. Sadly, often money does buy victory. And it is a David and Goliath in that we are up against a massive industry nationally.
If Kevin Sabet loses so many campaigns, it is also because the legalization camp owes much to 3 billionaires. John Sperling, who has created private universities. Peter Lewis, boss of insurance companies. In his lifetime, he has given $40 million to support legalization. And George Soros. Since the 90s, he has spent $80 million to change the drugs policy. It's purely philanthropic. Neither George Soros or either of the other billionaires have an economic interest in the marijuana industry. A lot of George Soros's donations go to an NGO, the Drug Policy Alliance, an organization founded by Ethan Nadelman. In 1988, This Pricetown University professor called for the legalization of cannabis, a revolutionary idea at the time.
Legalization does not mean some libertarian scenario of free drugs available to everybody. What it means is looking for alternatives to the current policies. That's what's important. The vast majority of Americans are not going to become drug addicts, even if drugs are legal.
Professor Nadelman, you've raised...
I believe that nobody should be punished or discriminated against or amongst based solely on the drug they put in our body, right? That's my basic moral belief, and I believe that's fundamentally grounded in human rights, that the state should have no right to take away somebody's freedom or their property or their family or whatever simply because of the drug they put in their body. That's my core belief, and it's the core belief of many of the leading activists.
A few years later, the professor would be able to go from making speeches to taking action.
In the summer of 1992, I received a phone call from a fellow named George Soros inviting me to lunch. And Soros was at this point not yet famous.
At the time, George Soros had founded the Open Society Institute, a philanthropic foundation that supports democracy in Eastern European countries. But until this point, he'd never been interested in drugs.
Soros and I had lunch at his office in the summer of '92, and we spent 2 hours arguing and discussing, and I was teaching him about elements of the drug issue. And finally, he looks at me and he says, listen, I see we agree on the basic issues. We'll have our differences. Now, I'm a very busy man, he says, but I have substantial resources. So let's assume I want to empower you to accomplish our common objectives.
Ethan Nadelman wanted to legalize recreational cannabis, but at the time, public opinion was not ready. So he decided to hold referendums on medicinal cannabis.
Soros was sympathetic to the issue of medical marijuana, not because he was in favor of broader legalization back then. He was not. It was because he saw it as an intersection of his interest in ending the drug war and another interest of his, which was death and dying with dignity.
Unquote. The Institute of Medicine recommends...
Well, when we started on the medical marijuana campaign, we needed to change the image. And that meant taking a 55-year-old woman who had just come through chemotherapy for her breast cancer and who was using marijuana to deal with the nausea of chemotherapy or with the loss of appetite. It meant finding a young man who had multiple sclerosis and was in a wheelchair for whom smoking marijuana was the way to reduce the pain of his spasms in his legs. So what we did was identify people, real people, for whom marijuana was medically beneficial and who were very sympathetic in the public eye. And they became the face of the campaign. Because the fact of the matter is, when people like this, who are real medical patients, when they go and testify before a state legislature or Congress, and they come in their wheelchair, and they're older and they're responsible, even the most cold-hearted Republican, his eyes begin to tear up when they hear the story.
And this is how, in 20 years, the plant has been de-demonized. This strategy has led to more than 30 US states legalizing the therapeutic use of cannabis. This is often the first step before full legalization.
It's nice to be able to sit back, having turned 60, and to say, we won, and we're winning. Not just on marijuana, but even more broadly in rolling back the rest of the drug war. I think I feel like people who are involved at the vanguard of the civil rights movement or the women's rights movement or the gay rights movement, I feel like how they feel, having played leadership roles in changing, in changing the country and changing the world, So I feel very, very good about it, yeah.
Narcotráfico, sí. Sí, narcotráfico. El problema del narcotráfico
The initiative to legalize sometimes comes from the highest state level. This is what happened in Uruguay, the first country to legalize recreational cannabis in 2013. Uruguay is situated between the two giants of South America, Brazil and Argentina, with very conservative drug policies. In this country, spared from cartels, the emergence of black market delinquency is launching the debate on legalization.
Había un fenómeno de ajustes de cuentas que se estaba dando cada vez más fuerte en nuestro país en el año 2012. En muchos de los casos eran jóvenes que morían en esos enfrentamientos entre bandas o entre grupos dentro de los territorios y por lo tanto la actividad del microtráfico vinculado al acceso en el cannabis se entendía que separándola y dándole reglas.
At the time, a former guerrilla of the far left had been elected president, Pepe Mujica. Pepe Mujica triggers several progressive reforms: the legalization of abortion, same-sex marriage, and the cannabis law. George Soros decided to support this last initiative.
So right away, my organization sends people down to Uruguay, and one of my colleagues ends up moving to Montevideo and helping to run the public education campaign in Uruguay. And our legal experts go down to Montevideo to do seminars for people there, and other people are coming in.
George Soros's support goes further. He appears in public with President Mujica, who is visiting New York. Two fundamentally opposed men, united by the shared desire to change the drugs policy.
Oh, I was there. Yeah. No, it was Soros and Mujica and me and Mujica's right-hand guy, Diego Canepa, his chief of staff. So the four of us met. I mean, that was, but two very different personalities, Soros and Mujica. Mujica, is, I don't know, he's his own personality, former Tupamaro guerrilla, kind of, stubborn in his own way. So I think they were sort of curious to meet one another.
3 months later, it's the moment that takes the whole world by surprise. The Uruguayan parliament votes for legalization.
Han votado 29 senadores, 16 lo han hecho por la afirmativa y 13 lo han hecho por la negativa.
Queda aprobado en general el proyecto de ley. El Senado ingresa a la discusión.
Uruguay became the first country to break with the UN Convention prohibiting marijuana, a historic date in drug history. Today, there is a consensus on the law, even at the highest level of the national police force.
Yo creo que esto es un problema de salud. Se debe entenderlo así en todo el mundo y enfrentarlo así, y no, por supuesto, desde el punto de vista de la acción policial en un Estado de Derecho.
What conclusions can be drawn today from the Uruguayan legalization? The country has chosen a regulatory model, the only one of its kind, a non-commercial system. To avoid drug tourism, there are no coffee shops here, no shops like in the Netherlands or Colorado. In order to obtain cannabis, citizens have 3 options. The first is cultivation for your own consumption. The law allows for 6 plants per household.
Lleva su trabajito. Hay que dedicarle horas por día. Pero ya ahorrando en lo que gastaba en el mercado negro, ya está retribuible. Obvio que 100% retribuible, si te tengo que decir si es retribuible. Claro.
For those who aren't green-fingered, it is possible to join a cannabis club. This one is run by a former farmer and dealer. Here, we don't produce for customers. The members share the harvest. legalization limits the number of members to 45 to avoid commercial misuse.
Bueno, en este momento estamos en plena zafra de cosecha, ¿no? En este momento tenemos un grupo de compañeros trabajando. Algunos prefieren la paga en el producto diciendo socio del club y pagan su cannabis a través del trabajo. No es que sea un empresario, soy un jardinero. Gano un salario que es un poco más oneroso del mínimo nacional.
Unlike Colorado, consumption here is controlled by the state for public health reasons. 40 grams maximum per month.
Los socios que necesitan eso comúnmente tienen a su pareja y inscriben a su pareja y sacan los 40 de él, los 40 de su pareja y siguen estando legales, los dos. Y claro, sin tener la necesidad. Si no, los 40 gramos de buena marihuana es muy difícil que te lo fumes, ¿entendés? Es de verdad, si te lo fumás es que sos una bestia.
There is a third supply channel, pharmacies. Every week, the state delivers 3 kilos of cannabis in small sachets to this pharmacist. On the day of delivery, the pharmacy is never empty. Uruguay is the only country in the world where this mode of distribution exists. The idea came from the pharmacists themselves.
Se venden en la farmacia psicofármacos que tienen efecto psicoactivo. Entonces, para mí fue agregar un producto más a mi negocio. ¿Sativa o índica?
Sativa.
Sativa. Son hasta 40 gramos mensuales. Pero lo que no sacaste la semana pasada no lo puedes sacar hoy.
Sí, entonces son 10 por semana.
10 por semana, exactamente. Coloca el pulgar. Exacto.
In order to be able to purchase, clients must join an anonymous national register that works using fingerprints.
El programa controla que no se pasen de los 10 gramos semanales. Por ejemplo, ahora son 12:36. El señor sacó, hoy es jueves 12:36. No puede venir antes del jueves que viene y ni antes de esta hora.
Even the THC rate is set by the state. It's up to 4 times lower than that of the US legal market.
Se ofrecieron al mercado cepas de una psicoactividad media-baja, no más alta que las que existían en el mercado ilegal antes de operativa la ley, pero mucho más cuidado el producto, que no existan metales pesados, hongos, microorganismos, porque eso pasa por estrictos controles de salud pública.
Despite appearances, legalization has not kept all its promises. Pharmacies sell their stock in less than a day. The black market still provides the majority of marijuana consumed in Uruguay. In this poor neighborhood, far from Montevideo's city center, the inhabitants are getting their supplies from both markets, illegal and legal.
La libertad de las personas y respetar el derecho a consumir.
Estas son las farmacias. Tengo 4 yo, hay una que se agregó ahora nueva. Y viste, y ahí dice, por ejemplo, esta dice no hay cannabis, esta dice los días de venta, va a ser el viernes y otro más. Estas solamente ahora dicen que no hay stock. Pero cuando tienen, pone, hay stock de cannabis y la variedad que tiene.
In the event of a stock shortage, there's still the black market.
¿Sabes lo que me dijeron a mí?
Esta es la marihuana ilegal.
¿Qué hay adentro? Es como una...
Y son cogollo, semilla, algo de palo, hoja. No te pone la hoja grande, pero va todo, ¿viste? Se parte, es como un corcho.
¿Qué efecto te hace? Porque algún contenido de THC tiene.
Depende, porque es la costumbre. Por ejemplo, yo ahora fumo y me desmayo. Claro, todo lo nocivo, todo eso que tiene, claro, el hongo, todo esto, que antes no te importaba nada, te lo fumabas, pero ahora que ya, claro, es como tomar un buen vino y después tomar un vino de caja, que te hace hacer algo en la garganta, ¿viste? Entonces, para la época de escasez, sirve. Ahora lo tengo ahí guardado.
What causes this shortage? The answer can be found at the production site. Marijuana sold in pharmacies is grown in these greenhouses on private military property. The state has entrusted domestic production to 2 private companies, Symbiosis and ICC Labs. But in the interest of public health, the state has provisionally limited production to 4 tons a year. 10 times as much is needed. At the head of these companies, 2 newcomers to the cannabis world. Francisco Ortiz von Bismarck, the descendant of the German Chancellor. A regular in gossip magazines, he is suspected of tax evasion in Spain and owns several companies in tax havens. And Juan Sartori, a Uruguayan entrepreneur who has made a fortune in agriculture and finance. Owner of a British football club, he is married to the daughter of Russian oligarch Dmitry Rybolovlev, president of AS Monaco. These businessmen are not interested in the small, state-led Uruguayan market, as we find out in this promotional video. On this land leased to the state, the company, ICC Labs, cultivates a medicinal variety of cannabis bound for the international market, a more than profitable business. According to these confidential financial analyst documents, its sales could go from $600,000 in 2017 to over $160 million in 2020. These entrepreneurs understood that the industry's future is CBD, the therapeutic molecule contained in the plant. Legalization makes it possible to rediscover a forgotten treasure, the medicinal virtues of the plant known since antiquity. It was used to treat loss of appetite or epilepsy. Until the beginning of the 20th century, it was part of the worldwide pharmacopoeia. More and more countries are reauthorizing the medical use of cannabis. Around 40 worldwide, half of which are in Europe. Switzerland has taken the lead in the CBD sector. This 5-hectare field near Lake Constance provides more than 2 tons of cannabis each year. This is one of the only legal cannabis fields in Europe. The varieties grown here have been selected for their high CBD content. Claudia Zires-Naut manages the company that grows these plants.
Hi Nick.
Hallo.
Na, alles gut?
Ja?
Wunderbar.
The crop complies with hygiene and quality regulations in the food sector.
Also zuerst werden diese größeren Blätter hier entfernt, ja? Und danach wird der Nick in ungefähr 30 cm Höhe abschneiden. Man macht das noch an der Pflanze, damit es für die Blüte schonender ist.
Trained biologist Claudia Zires-Naut has created a company dedicated to medical cannabis.
Eigentlich komme ich aus der pharmazeutischen Industrie. Ich war bei verschiedenen Firmen, bei Boehringer, bei Roche, immer international tätig. Also ich bin klassisch im Pharmageschäft groß geworden, viele, viele Jahre. Mit zunehmender Legalisierung wird der Markt sich sehr, sehr stark steigern. Also die Bedarfe werden sehr stark ansteigen in den nächsten Jahren, unserer Meinung nach. Und zwar hauptsächlich in Richtung der CBD-Produktion. Und dieser Markt wird deutlich ansteigen.
In recent years, CBD has been introduced into parapharmacy, cosmetic, and well-being aisles. It's reaching out to a new clientele.
Das heißt, hier dieses ist wieder die Creme. Also das ist ein Hanfbalsam, den man zum Einreiben verwendet. Und hier haben Sie 2 verschiedene Tinkturen. Und dann haben wir noch einen speziellen Tee, der in der Apotheke verkauft wird. Also generell diese ganzen Metrofarm-Produkte hier kann man in der Apotheke in der Schweiz bekommen. So, also das ist das Kaugummi, wird in der Schweiz verkauft, ist aber auch in Europa zu bekommen. Dann noch was ganz anderes, Tiermedizin. Also wir bekommen derzeit aus Deutschland eine sehr, sehr gute Rückmeldung. Die Nachfrage bei den Hunde- und Katzenbesitzern ist sehr, sehr groß. Ja, es läuft sehr gut.
Claudia Zirasnaut has bigger ambitions. She would like to patent actual medicines. For this, she is carrying out clinical studies in South America.
La mayoría de los pacientes consumen tinturas, porque es lo más natural, digamos. El tema de las gotas es muy fácil del uso.
I can talk to you soon. Dazu benötigt man natürlich klinische Studien. Damit haben wir begonnen. Ich kann Ihnen leider nicht genau sagen, wo wir die im Moment durchführen und zu welchen Indikationen, weil wir das auch noch ein bisschen geheim halten wollen.
The reason she believes in it is because there are already 3 cannabis-based medicines in the world. They are prescribed to patients with multiple sclerosis or epilepsy. There is a market to be had before the giants of the pharmaceutical industry take an interest.
Im Moment ist die Pharmaindustrie noch sehr zurückhaltend, beobachtet. Bin ich mir relativ sicher, was passieren wird. Die Pharmaindustrie wird sich mit der Schmerzindikation der Pflanze sicherlich beschäftigen müssen. Und es wird bald dazu kommen, dass wir auch in richtigen großen pharmazeutischen Firmen Cannabis wieder als Heilpflanze finden werden.
The time for multinational cannabis companies has already begun. In Canada, in 2018, Canada was the first G7 country to legalize all cannabis use nationwide. A campaign promise from candidate Justin Trudeau.
Légaliser de la façon correcte, en protégeant nos jeunes, en assurant qu'on n'envoie pas des milliards de dollars dans les poches du crime organisé comme on le fait actuellement. C'est la seule façon de protéger nos jeunes, de protéger nos communautés. Et c'est ce que nous allons faire comme promis.
But who benefits from legalization today? Each province can apply the law restrictively. In Quebec, as with alcohol, state stores have a monopoly on sales and set the price. Starting at $5.25 a gram at the opening of the market. Only slightly more than on the black market. However, some long-time activists are unhappy.
Buy an illegal Quebec cannabis flag. You cannot buy these anywhere else in the province of Quebec. All illegal.
All these are illegal. I mean, they have made them.
Mark Emery spent several years in prison for selling marijuana when it was banned. He criticizes the production and distribution grabbing by some major groups. To avoid the risk of resale, the government has prohibited citizens from growing their own crops.
We're not getting what we want. What we have in Quebec is the opposite of what we want. When I was campaigning all these years to change the laws, it was so ordinary people could sell pot. It's so ordinary people could grow pot. The same people who were being charged under all these offenses. That's who I was trying to liberate. I wasn't trying to liberate the big businessman so he could spend money and become a big capitalist producer of factory farmed weed. I wasn't fighting so the Quebec government that used to hunt us down could have a monopoly selling their shitty corporate weed to us while the rest of us still get charged with growing or selling. Right? I mean, it's the worst legalization ever. The irony is the only thing I'm not doing that's illegal right now is smoking a joint. Go figure that. Go figure that. The flag's illegal, but the joint is not. It's crazy.
Canadians are among the biggest smokers of cannabis, pot, as they call it here. Their annual consumption is estimated at $5 billion Canadian dollars and could soon match the wine sector. 100 or so producers share the market. However, the origin of some financing is problematic.
Nous, bureau d'enquête du Journal de Montréal, avant même la légalisation, nous avons identifié qu'il y avait pour environ 165 millions de dollars en provenance de paradis fiscaux qui avaient été investis dans des producteurs de cannabis canadiens autorisés. On avait une myriade de petites îles, qu'on parle des îles Seychelles, qu'on parle des îles Marshall, Curaçao dans les Antilles néerlandaises, des endroits très, très petits, des paradis fiscaux très exotiques, disons, qui avaient financé l'industrie. À la suite de notre reportage, qui était au début 2018, le Sénat canadien a réagi pour tenter de faire amender la loi pour la légalisation du cannabis, de manière à ce qu'on puisse avoir le portrait transparent de qui se trouve derrière les investissements offshore. Par contre, le gouvernement n'a pas accepté cet amendement-là, donc ça n'a pas été adopté. Donc, on n'a toujours pas plus d'informations.
Today, more than $300 million Canadian dollars from tax havens fund the cannabis sector. Funds that are outside the Canadian tax system.
Quand on parle d'un segment de l'économie qui a été légalisé justement pour apporter des recettes au niveau du gouvernement, de penser que c'est seulement le petit consommateur qui va payer les taxes sur le produit et que les investisseurs aux poches profondes, eux, vont profiter d'une optimisation fiscale très, très poussée. Encore là, ça soulève des questions.
The relationship between the cannabis industry and power also raises questions. Several members of Justin Trudeau's party have left politics to get involved in the cannabis business.
On a, par exemple, Chuck Rifici, qui est bien connu, qui est un peu surnommé comme le parrain du cannabis au Canada, donc qui est l'ancien directeur des finances du Parti libéral. D'autres noms également surgissent. On peut penser à Martin Cochon, l'ancien ministre libéral de la Justice. On a également Adam Miron, qui est l'ancien directeur national du Parti libéral du Canada. Donc, ça fait jaser beaucoup. Pourquoi autant de gens qui ont des liens politiques, des connexions politiques se retrouvent à des endroits stratégiques dans l'industrie du cannabis?
Recently forbidden, cannabis has entered the world of heavy consumption and unbridled financial capitalism. The world leader is Canopy Growth. Its flagship brand, Tweed, was launched by Chuck Rifici, a former chief financial officer of the Liberal Party, who has become the famous cannabis godfather. And Bruce Linton, an entrepreneur of modern technology who anticipated the future legalization as early as 2013.
I spent one whole day understanding what might be the new rules, and by the end of the day, I began a marijuana business, having never purchased marijuana. And I contacted 4 people and asked each of them, would you like to be involved with the business with me? And uniformly, they said, this is the worst idea you've ever had. And at the end of the day, after their rejection, I said, for sure, I'm starting a marijuana business. And that's how I got here.
Cannabis has entered a new era with Bruce Linton. The industrial stage, assembly line work, and mass production. Its plant produces the largest legal cannabis crop in history, about 80 tons a year, 20 times that of Uruguay. Each of these bags is worth $10,000. The listed startup was already worth 15 billion Canadian dollars on the first day of legalization, almost as much as Carrefour or Veolia. A stock market value obtained thanks to the American alcohol group Constellation. This beer and wine giant invested 5 billion Canadian dollars to become a major shareholder in Canopy and join the party.
I think what they wanted to do was have a continuous opportunity of growth. And so if you have any fear that cannabis, when medically or recreationally available, disrupts alcohol, if you're in the alcohol business, you should buy those companies. Motivations on doing a transaction with $5 billion, called $4 billion US. Constellation, I think, viewed what we're doing as both very disruptive across many categories. Pharmaceutical, pet care, alcohol, sports recoveries. A number of pundits are starting to come to an annual number every year of about a $500 billion piece of business.
The enthusiasm for cannabis hinges on a gamble. The gamble that many extracts of the plant will soon appear on our supermarket shelves. Cannabis is not just 2 molecules. It actually contains dozens of them. Each has specific effects on the organism. A potential that remains untapped, which bodes well for a multitude of commercial opportunities.
You and me are gonna have a glass. You come back to Canada in about a year, I'm gonna pour you a nice glass of Tweed and Tonic. You're gonna smell it, it's gonna smell like a little bit pine. It's not gonna give you a dehydration headache. And it might make you feel a little bit upbeat, but it'll have you'll feel it in maybe 14, 13, 12, 16 minutes. And it will have a low dosage, and it won't be so strong that you're losing this. You'll just be in charge, but feel positive.
Will cannabis be the proclaimed El Dorado? Several multinationals seem convinced of it. Heineken has bought the American brewer Lagunitas to launch alcohol-free cannabis drinks. Canadian brewer Molson Coors and Hexo are also producing cannabis drinks. Altria, owner of Marlboro, has invested €1.5 billion in Kronos.
It's a three-headed monster of alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. Alcohol already is an industry that kills 100,000 people a year. They know how to market to college students. They know how to market around the world, around the country. And I worry that they, combining with marijuana, would be a double threat. I worry also about tobacco also taking over marijuana. They have members of their board who sit on members of other boards of marijuana companies. So alcohol and tobacco, those are the 2 global, worldwide industries that have been a disaster for public health and safety. Why would we want to emulate alcohol and tobacco?
For states that want to legalize, there is still time to define their own mode of regulation. Somewhere between Uruguay's state model concerned with public health and an Anglo-Saxon business model, which is a big part of the industry.
There's a lot of good things that are coming out of the legalization of marijuana, but one of the bad things is that the money being made is going to be less made by poorer people, white, black, and brown, who were growing it, making it, producing it, selling it. And more this industry is going to be dominated by people, who have no history with marijuana, who just see it as another commodity, another opportunity to make money. And I didn't spend my lifetime working to legalize marijuana so that these guys could get rich.
To legalize marijuana.
Liberalisatie van cannabis.
Let's not be duped by dope. Duped by dope.
America's only in the United States. Whenever you're ready. It's drug abuse.